My name is Scott Kellogg. I'm the Educational Director of the Radix Ecological Sustainability Center, which is a nonprofit urban environmental education organization right here in the south end of Albany. We educate youth about the possibilities for building resilient and sustainable urban communities, demonstrating how it's possible to simultaneously live sustainability and be creating jobs as well. I'm also a resident of Albany, living at the corner of Elm and Eagle Streets with my wife and my two beautiful daughters, aged 4 and 7, disturbingly close to the so-called blast zone. Currently, we are observing the confluence of both global and local issues and their impacts. On one hand, we're seeing the results of a nation and a world with an insatiable desire for cheap petroleum resources. Environmental devastation, wars, and climate chaos are only some of the more visible and widely discussed repercussions. What is less observable, however, is the impact that our choices regarding energy use is having upon the residents of low-income communities in both the inner city and rural areas. These populations of people are frequently ignored and invisible to those in the outer suburbs. They must too frequently bear the brunt of the consequences of our choices, occurring in the form of disproportionate exposure to environmental toxins resulting from petrochemical industries and in the immediate danger resulting from associated accidents. I oppose the developments of an oil heating facility at the Port of Albany, as well as the continued use of trains to transport these dangerous materials through our city. Our response must be twofold. One, we must reduce our reliance on dangerous and polluting energy resources, favoring renewable and non-polluting options. And secondly, we must relieve underrepresented populations from the unfair share of the environmental burdens thrown upon them. Only then can we progress towards being a society that is more ecologically sustainable, resilient, and socially just. Thank you.
We're going to take about a 10-minute.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. As they say, it's oftentimes that near the end, people are leaving, and the most important things are going to be said. And one of the things that I want to share is that we have been putting a lot more resources on Mayor and Mayor. I'm one of the national directors of the Sierra Club. Sierra Club Atlantic Chapter, Roger Down, of our staff, has been working and coordinating with the community. And as a long-time environmental justice activist, and more importantly with regards to community participation, is to say, right here in this community, I too am deeply saddened because, again, we as a state and as a community should know better. But environmental injustice is not only just about the action that is happening. It's about powerlessness. It's about the struggles within the community that has inadequate resources to respond to these persistent threats. People are too busy struggling with poor and poverty issues, and this is one of the areas where they get taken advantage. Dominic Calcelero is right. The issue of the security level at this public hearing is just excessive and outrageous. Those of you who are from residents of the city, I will be speaking, also sending a letter to the city school district, because Mr. Grogan and his actions with regards to muting public expression by, policy of hiding or as they say, not displaying signs, it's just outrageous. You have a right to be heard, and more importantly, you don't need special treatment. Environmental justice is about equal treatment under the law, okay? And making sure that those processes are sensitive. In short, and it's with a heavy heart and sadness that, folks should know that at Arbor Hill, the South End, West Albany are environmental justice communities. It's not up to a community, not up to a business to decide that. And it's not enough to rely upon legal notices to the paper. This is one of the tactics that we pointed out in trainings of the state, the federal government, and agencies all around the country, how companies get around, as I say, informing a community and empowering a community and using processes that can, as I say, comply with the letter of the law, but yet disempower a community. This is what's happened here. It's not just the South End. This rail process goes through North Albany, Arbor Hill, and the South End. Do not isolate yourself in saying it's only the South End. The permit is dealing with that specific issue. If you isolate yourselves, it's divide and conquer. You don't have that power to come out. Your strength is going to be your community. You know, remember this process before it got to just the DEC was 3 years in City Hall, 3 years in Common Council. Part of reapportionment is about power and getting yourselves to select politicians that represent you. The minority committees are fragmented between multiple leaders, etc., and we've got to pull together on that. At the end of the day,
your time is up.
okay, thank you. But at the end of the day, I'm asking DEC to rescind its negative declaration and issue a positive deck and make sure the EJ areas of the South End, Albany, West Albany, Arbor Hill, and North Albany are included. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to call some more speakers to move up front. Molly Madison, Gregory Bell, Miriam Tell, and Jessica Simon. And our next speaker is Todd Hunsinger. Is Todd Hunsinger here? Pete Looker?
I'd like to ask, how does the emergency response plan from global differ in reality from that was in Quebec where the 47 people were killed? I'd like to see some specifics on how that is different from what they had, and how many fewer or more will be killed or injured here with this plan. Global LLC. LLC stands for Limited Liability Corporation, okay? That means you shuffle all these, you play all these games, so if you lose something, you just say, oh, it was them, it wasn't us, we take the profit. I think there should be a bond and insurance. I have to get insurance when I go work in somebody's house, one house. They should have a bond and insurance to cover the total worst case scenario. That's what they had to do when they built that mall over in Rotterdam on the wall. Why not? When we injured or killed over 100,000 innocent Iraqis, it was called collateral damage. I used to live a couple blocks from Albany's incinerator. At that time, we were collateral damage, although not called that. The people, women, men, kids around here are collateral damage. That's environmental injustice. I resent it. No person is more valuable, no person is less valuable. As a citizen, a parent, a Christian, I'm disgusted by that proposal. And on the positive side, I'd like to, no adverse environmental impacts, no adverse air emissions. I would laugh if it wasn't so serious. We do need a positive deck on here. What if we followed the Jacobs and Stanford study, which showed at a savings compared to what we're doing now, we could be totally, New York State could be totally off of fossil fuels in 20 years at a net income, at a net savings. And yet we're going to build more idiotic fossil fuel facilities to ship it off to the rest of the world.
Mr. Looker, your time is up.
Thank you.
Martha Green. Martha Green. William Law.
I'm William Law, a resident of the Mount Hope community, which overlooks Ezra Princess Homes, which overlooks the port. I've lived there for 41 years, and I'm used to the sight, sound, and smells of the port. And I'm concerned about what's going on here. My major concern is the environment. My other concern is safety and the economic impact that it will have in Albany. What do we gain economically from this facility being here? I looked over the DEC notes and I saw the word evacuation plan. And my concern is, what is that evacuation plan? Is there going to be a siren in the case of an explosion, or that an explosion about to happen so we can hear that, so we have time to leave? Will it be marked evacuation routes, so I'll know not to go down 787 toward the port? Will I be able to get on the thruway and exit quickly? So these are concerns that I have. What will that look like? I'm also a trained chemist, and I reiterate the concerns that Dr. Carpenter had about air pollution and the environment, because whatever you put in the environment has to go somewhere. And if it's in the environment, it's going to go into our bodies and be processed, and most in a negative way. So I'm also concerned about that. And so I would like to know how we're going to handle these things, and knowing that this oil does have a demonstrated explosive nature, as demonstrated with the explosion up in Quebec. And I'm concerned that we have this kind of oil that close to the facilities in Ezra Prentice, as well as Mount Hope, the school, and the South End in general, and also coming to the city. So I'd like DEC to really take all this into consideration. I'd like to know where I have to go when the siren goes off.
Joe Lombardo.
Hello, I'm Joe Lombardo. I'm an anti-war activist. I'm a member of Bethlehem Neighbors for Peace, a resident of Bethlehem in Albany County. I'm also the national co-coordinator of UNAC, United National Anti-War Coalition, which has affiliates in pretty much every major city throughout the country. And we all know that these wars are oil wars, so as an activist and as a human being, I was concerned about this procedure. I was driving through Watervliet yesterday, or maybe it was the day before, and I was stopped at the train tracks there because one of these trains with these oil cars, huge trains, were going through. I stayed there for 10 minutes. I wasn't concerned just about the inconvenience. Those train tracks go through downtown Watervliet. If there was an accident like we saw in North Dakota or like we saw in Canada, Watervliet is gone. Now, I'm also a labor activist all my life and a member of the Troy Area Labor Council. And on our council, there's a representative of the rail unions in the Selkirk rail yard. And they are fighting against, nationally, they are fighting against the rail companies who would take the trains that used to have 2 and 3 crew members, and they want them to have a single crew member. And then these crew members are put on something called an extra board. They could work a full shift and then go home for a couple of hours, and they may have to work another shift again if they're on that. So they're tired. So you see things like the accident we saw down in New York City where an engineer fell asleep. They say on these trains you can't fall asleep. There's a dead man switch. But they've learned how to just put their foot on the dead man switch, and they've learned how to just doze for a minute. In this case, he fell asleep, and in this case, there was an accident. I'm concerned about those accidents, and I'm concerned about the fact that rail cars are not kept up to snuff. That's what happened in Canada. The brakes failed when that single train crew member had to go and take a rest, and he left his train and put the brake on, and it failed, and it destroyed a town. Our towns can be destroyed too. These fossil fuels are causing climate change. They're causing the destruction of our ecology. They have to be stopped. They have to be kept in the ground. And we need to deny the permit to this greed that will be in our port. And this is the way we can help keep those in the ground and put real resources and real energy into finding the alternative energy that we all need to keep safe and keep our energy flowing. Thank you.
I'm going to call the next group: Diana Wright, Gwen Reed, Kate Mars, Deborah Richards, Mary Bailey. Our next speaker is Molly Madison. Is Molly here?
My name is Molly Madison. I am with the Center for Biological Diversity, and I came here from Vermont to speak. Last month, my organization called for a moratorium on the transport of dangerous crude oil in the Northeast until such time as there can be a proper safety and environmental assessment of this dangerous practice. My comment is on the impact of permitting this facility on places and communities outside of Albany. The focus only on air emissions and only on the Port of Albany needs to be broadened. Explosive Bakken crude oil is currently traveling all across New York along Lake Champlain. I live on the east shore of Lake Champlain. It doesn't matter that there's a state border between New York and Vermont. Lake Champlain will be affected if there is a spill there. If there is a new heating facility here and crude requiring heating, which I think most of us believe is going to be tar sands is allowed, communities throughout New York will be facing not only the threat of explosive Bakken crude, but also of potential tar sand spills. A tar sand spill via train derailment or by barge accident into the Hudson would potentially be devastating to water quality, but also to wildlife. It would also be incredibly difficult and expensive to clean up. The tar sand spill, which occurred in the Kalamazoo River in Michigan in 2010, is still being cleaned up, and it has cost nearly $1 billion to date. The long-term effect on the health of the river and the creatures that live there has yet to be determined.